Hey, welcome everyone to the ArchiCAD User Monthly Webinar for June 2019. This is your host, Eric Bobrow. I'm speaking to you from San Rafael, California, where it's a beautiful, I guess, spring. Maybe today's the first day of summer, somewhere in there. Beautiful day. We've got a few ArchiCAD users on the line with me today who are going to be sharing some of their projects and information. We've got John Hallgarth, you can see sharing the screen with me. Hey, John, how are you doing?
Hey, Eric. Doing well, thanks.
So John is going to be sharing some information, a little teaser presentation, about 5-10 minutes, about some of the project that we're working on together, which is really developing an ArchiCAD estimating solution, including training, template, and support. So for all of you who are interested in knowing more about how to get quantities and cost takeoffs from your ArchiCAD model, we'll be talking about that. Now, want to make sure that you all can hear me and see me, and we're communicating. You can communicate through the GoToWebinar control palette, I guess. I see, oh, Caitlyn, you have arrived. There you go. Okay, Caitlyn's one of our panelists, so I'm going to go make her panelist here. And we have Carlos from France. And then if you're one of my regulars on the ArchiCAD training and coaching, you can use the ArchiCAD training, and we'll put it onto coaching calls here. Okay, so if you're in the ArchiCAD coaching program, you can use the Slack workspace for the coaching calls, where we'll be able to communicate for today's session. All right, so I see Steve in Colorado is online, and let me know that you can hear us, see us, and where you're calling in from. You know, I see that we've got 68 people on the line right now. Sure, we'll get quite a few more in the next few minutes. We'll be running probably for 90 minutes to 2 hours today. The focus of today's session is on looking at different projects by different users that all share one thing in common. Well, at least two things in common. One is they're done in ArchiCAD, and the other is that they're done using MasterTemplate. Now, we all use ArchiCAD, all of you who are on this call or watching the recording, and there's certain similarities in the workflow, and you know, you're thinking in 3D and you're developing models primarily, and 2D is sort of really closely connected and in fact generally derived from the models. But all of the designs, all of the styles around the world are unique, different. Certainly each of you has the opportunity to create your own style of using ArchiCAD. Now, a template is a framework that provides tools, resources, and a structure for the project file that make it, if it's set up properly, make it easy to get work done. If it's set up sort of in a very sort of simple, minimal fashion, then you can always build what you need into it, but you're going to be putting an extra effort to create the additional resources and structure. MasterTemplate is a project that I initiated back 12, 13 years ago with a partner, an architect in Southern California named Scott Bulmer. And the idea was to put in as much smart stuff as we could into the template to make it as easy as possible to start a project and run it and just have everything there. Basic philosophy is to have as much as you would need or any user would need, but no more, but definitely allow you to create your project with a minimum of overhead. Now we'll see in today's presentation 3 users who have 4 different projects, and you can see on screen that they are quite different in styles. We've got 3 residential ones and 1 commercial 10-story condo, I think it's a condo down in the Cayman Islands, and they all quite different, but they all have the same structure behind them. So I thought that would be an interesting topic, just to find out how the structure influences the work and what people need to do to adapt it to their own style. Now, before we proceed into that, I'm going to invite John to present. John Hogarth, I'm really pleased to be working closely with. John, you want to tell people a little bit about who you are and what you've done, and then I'll switch over the screen so you can show that, or maybe I'll switch over the screen now so when you're talking you can show that. So let me make you presenter.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back. Let me turn on the screen. I'm not sure what screen. Let me choose. Okay, there we go. So yeah, just a little bit about me. Come from the construction industry and been using ArchiCAD ever since version 11. So definitely have always preferred ArchiCAD, and over the last few years I've been developing a template that I categorize as a design build template that I'm really excited about. It's called ContraBIM. You've probably seen some previews and some different demos I've done in the past, but I think really quick what we wanted to share today is just some updates and announcements on this collaborative template that Eric and I are working on, which we're calling AMT plus C5D. AMT obviously is MasterTemplate, and then I've developed a package that I call C5D, which is really the ContraBIM 5D estimating workflow. So I'm really excited about this. It's starting to turn out really well, and that's what we're going to do today, is just share a little bit of progress. So really what the whole purpose of this is to leverage MasterTemplate, which is obviously very robust already and is a lot of people prefer using that for their architectural design workflow, but we really want to be able to do a little more with it and leverage the ContraBIM 5D estimating workflow, which enables users to really automate how quantities are being reported, as well as just how to organize model elements in general for cost coding. With this solution, we can also link directly to Excel for creating some really flexible estimates. And the whole purpose here is to really help quantify and evaluate early target budgets, and then validate later on once you have the quantity takeoffs from the model with those initial projections to really dial in the estimate on your project. So I'm definitely pleased to share that the cost loading process is moving along smoothly. We have already loaded all the walls and most of the major elements with the property data that's going to be driving this cost estimating workflow. So you can see here all these labels that are going in and extracting out different costs and adding them up into wall assemblies, and we're really getting a lot of detail out of these model elements that we can use for breaking down the different quantities into different bid packages. So we can do this on complex walls. We're doing this on all the stairs and railings, objects, different room assemblies. For those MasterTemplate users, this all probably looks very familiar, because this is obviously the legends file here that we're just loading up as the initial target for linking together with the C5D package. So we're also developing some tools within Excel that makes it really easy to update costs when working with this type of template. So here we're looking at just a quick snip of one Excel sheet that allows you to store all of your cost below the line, so to speak, and then quickly apply that to all your different wall types at once. So this just makes the process of updating and manipulating your data that much quicker and easier. One thing that's really nice about this workflow is you can link directly into Excel. You may have seen this done in some of the previous videos that I've done together here with Eric. But it's just a really powerful solution that's simple, and it's very open, where you can still control your own data and manipulate it as needed. But you can put together these nice summary graphics and really start to manage your budgets and control your costs as you're making those design decisions. So one thing I'm really excited about is the example project that we are going to be loading up as part of this cost estimating workflow. It's also going to be the subject of a quantity and cost estimating course that Eric and I are going to be putting on, which is really going to dive into kind of the theory behind estimating and model-based estimating in particular. So we're going to be getting into the topics of just what is the key BIM data that we need to have embedded in objects for them to report correctly. We'll talk all about how to filter reports for generating different trade packages. We'll get into Excel and cover a bunch of tips and best practices. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I see the designer of this project has just signed in, Gerald Hoffman. Gerald, do you want to put on your webcam?
Yeah, so this project that we're looking at here.
So Gerald will actually be talking about this project and another project later on today, but we're just so pleased to have this as a resource for the upcoming course. And we'll actually be able to, for those people who are participating, we'll be able to get a copy of the file, which will be a great study tool.
Yeah, it's a really awesome model. I'm excited to sink my teeth into it and apply the cost estimating workflow to a project that's done really well in MasterTemplate. So it's going to be really interesting. And what we're going to be doing as kind of like a bonus is I'll actually be recording the process of how I'm applying the C5D product. So this is going to get into kind of the nitty-gritty detail of how to set up all the properties and the reports, and really how we're going to dissect this particular project to generate all these specific trade quantity reports. So there's going to be a ton of videos included in this. We're probably looking 70 to 80 videos at least, but we'll try to compress them down and make them as to the point as possible. But I think it's going to be a really interesting just learning experience going through and dissecting this project, breaking it down into the different trade packages. So yeah, I think Eric, we've talked about this a little bit. There's really 4 different things that we are offering as part of this joint collaborative product. One being the quantity and cost estimating training course, which we're still doing some planning on this, but it looks to be probably a 6-week training course that covers a lot of the theory. We'll be including a lot of these more detailed recordings of how we're applying and building the example project as part of that course. But we'll also be obviously offering the combined template, which will include the legends, the project template files, and then of course this amazing example project that Gerald has been so kind to share with us. And then there'll of course be some of those more detailed training courses, which will be probably just posted to YouTube as they are produced. So you'll be able to check those out for free and kind of monitor the progress as we go through and assign C5D to this project. And Eric and I will also be doing a coaching program to go along with this whole package to really help those who are interested in deploying these workflows and helping them on along the way. So Eric, we could talk, I guess, a little bit about the website that's been launched for this. It's ArchiCADestimating.com. So this is going to be really just the home page for signing up to get more information. Right now, we've posted a what I call a target-based estimating worksheet. You can see a snip here of it on the right. It's essentially a worksheet that can help any user put together a quick target-based estimate just by going through and plugging in the gross area of the project, and then going down the different line items for each CSI code, and then plugging in the gross square footage value or gross square meter value to quickly generate an initial budget estimate. So right now, if you go to the ArchiCADestimating.com, you can download this for free. It's just a single Excel file, and it's pretty fun to play around with, and it only takes a few minutes to put together a budget. So I definitely recommend checking that out. So Eric, I guess I can hand it back to you, or do you have any other comments you want to add to this?
Well, I just wanted to, have Gerald say hello. We'll have a longer time with Gerald later, but Gerald, how are you doing?
Good. I didn't get a link. I thank you for sending it to me. I did. I thought, oh, well, that would be great. I wouldn't be able to log into the thing that I'm actually supposed to be on. That would be good. But I'm here.
That's great.
Hi, John.
Hey, Gerald. Glad you
Yeah,
made it.
this looks amazing. Already what you've done is this is great. I'm really excited about this, by the way,
Yeah,
because this
let's
is the
get it.
one part of ArchiCAD that is kind of like a mystery area for most people, I think. I mean, I've been using the program since version 4.55, and I've never had the courage to really dive into this, or the time, I suppose. But this, and that's what's good about this. So I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your work is great. We're going to look at it in some detail after the other presenters. You'll be the sort of second half of the session.
Okay.
So we'll move on. I'm just going to bring up on my screen. Let's see. I'm going to switch to make myself presenter here.
Eric, thanks for having me on. I mentioned I have a scheduling conflict I got to run for, but I'm going to hang on for just a few minutes here and then I'll sign off. So
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, I mean, obviously there's going to be lots of questions over time, but if you have any questions just right now for John or myself, just about the estimating concept and what this is going to be, feel free to type them in to either go to webinar control panel or to Slack. You can see here, just set up the site, archicadestimating.com, and basically as a little description of what it's going to have, and an opportunity for you to opt in to get that worksheet, and just a little bit about John and myself here. So we'll invite you to come there and let us know that you're interested in quantities and estimating, and grab that little conceptual tool. Let me see if there's any questions. I see Michael Brown is typing in something. Started with John, comma, and then it went to a new line. I'm waiting to see what the Dear John letter says. So Ken Brooks says, what is your source for unit cost data? So John, you want to just say what types of sources can be used and how this will work?
yeah, there's several different cost sources out there. I think RS Means is probably one of the most widely known, so that's a good one. There's certainly others depending on where you're located. I think RS Means is primarily US based, but if you're international, then I'd look for a regional or country specific cost manual to reference. But RS Means is a good place to start.
So behind that question is, how accurate is the data, and do we have flexibility with it? And essentially the answer is, you put in the data in a very convenient, sensible way from whatever source, whether it's RS Means or your contractor or your own sort of database that you work with if you're doing design build and things, and then it gets used in the reporting. So the system is flexible and extensible and can be kept as current as you need it to be. So you can update it weekly or monthly or yearly, whatever you need, or that certain things are fairly stable and other things maybe fluctuate. You can just focus on the things that might have the most impact that need to be kept up to date. And I see Steve Nichols says, best source for unit costs are your suppliers. So certainly part of the whole thing here is, how do you get accurate quantity data so that you can ask your suppliers just straight up, how much would this much be? Obviously, for a final bid, they're going to need to review the project, but for initial comparisons, you'll have some very accurate numbers. So anyway, this is something we're going to be developing together. I mean, John has been focused on this area for a long time, and I've been getting more involved in it, and together we're going to bring a new solution to the market in terms of ArchiCAD users. So really excited about it. Oh, by the way, in terms of time frame, we're looking at doing some webinar presentations on it in the second half of July and running the course starting in August. So that is at least the current time frame. And all right, so we'll see, I think, so Michael Brown says, I look forward to working with you. Okay, great. So we shall now move on to the main topic here, which are these projects. So I'm going to invite to the stage Kaitlyn Kelly. So let me see, I've got too many things on my screen here. So I know that I had, I had your picture. You don't have a webcam as I recall, but there it is. There's the picture. So let me put that picture on. Come on now. It's just buried behind them. There we go. Okay, so now.
I do have a webcam.
You do? Oh, okay.
I was kind of like, I wonder why I don't have a webcam.
Okay. Now, why did this? I guess I must have. There we go. Okay. Well, there's what you look like in a picture. Now let's see if we can get your webcam on. There you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
So Gerald, we'll have you come back in a little bit.
Okay.
And so Kaitlyn and I will look at Kaitlyn's project. So Gerald, you can just turn off your webcam by clicking the little button with the webcam indicator, and you can mute your microphone as well.
Okay, just a minute.
And I will switch over to, let's see, it is Kaitlyn's project I've got it up here. And let me just see if I can get everything moved over on my screen so I can see it. So we're still seeing you, Gerald. Trying to figure out where there we go. Okay, good. So we have three presenters today. Kaitlyn Kelly, known for a while, originally based in Southern California, now living in another part of the US. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into ArchiCAD and what type of work you do.
Yeah, so I've been an architect for over 30 years, was mostly in Southern California until about 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years now. I moved to Arkansas because I decided I had a firm in Southern California and then decided to go into the architect developer mode where I have been developing my own projects now as opposed to just doing client-based work. And so I moved to Bentonville, Arkansas, and have been working here doing some interesting work. And this project that we're looking at here is in La Jolla, California. It was a tear down. So the house itself is right on the bluff, but on the east side of the street. It overlooks houses that sit lower down and has a beautiful ocean view. And it was about a $4 million project. The house is just shy of 8,000 square feet. It has a full basement. So being in La Jolla and being that close to the ocean, it was quite involved in terms of all the data that needed to be really, really accurate for the different constraints that the jurisdiction has imposed upon development in La Jolla. So there was the coastal review, the La Jolla design review, the city's review process, making sure you're adhering to all the height limits, and it being a basement, you can't go over existing grades and things like that with the heights. So the drawings actually reflect a lot of this data in terms of what needed to be shown to the it looks like that drawing's not fully generated. Interesting. But needed to be shown to the city that we're not exceeding heights, that certain parts of the basement are being counted toward the floor area ratios and things like that. So
here I can see, I'm just obviously going through the project a little bit while you're talking. So we have that. And so this line here in space is one of your limit lines?
Yeah, that's the datum. That's the height limit.
So it's based on your original grade points and being elevated.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And then you were talking about stuff that related to the basement and certain areas that were included, and some things have to be set back and things like that?
Yes, exactly. So by using the mesh modeling tool for the site, I was able to get really accurate data from this using the surveyor's information in order to be able to prove to the city that I wasn't exceeding floor area ratios, and I was including the basement areas that needed to be included for the calculations.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of start to see, I think it's more in the transverse sections where you're cutting across the length of the site that you see more of that. But here you can just see the, and it might even be on the site plan where if you go to the site plan, you can see how there's, yeah. Yeah, so that's that gaff line, for example. That's all area that had to be. That was a line determined by the elevation, the site elevations that you know.
This GFA line.
Yeah, that GFA. So the gross floor area and all that getting calculated into the floor area ratio and things like that. So what was outside of it and what was included in it.
Well, just want to say, you know, even at a quick glance, everything looks very crisp, clear. You know, even though the project has complexity, it looks very approachable, just, you know, to look at it and understand what's going on. Now, so here we have the context in terms of the larger site conditions, yeah, so we've been looking at some views that you had just sort of pulled out for today's presentation here. I'll just point out for those of you who haven't, you know, looked at MasterTemplate before, that of course it's a standard project. You can do whatever views you want, like create a folder here of save views for meeting with the client, but it's organized in terms of imported reference materials, so some places to put drawing PDFs or other downloads or things like that, modeling and design, so some very extensible groups of views for working on the design process, and then construction documents and presentations as separate sections, so following the general workflow. So as we go in here, now we're looking at sort of the standard MasterTemplate groupings, and if we go to, let's say, floor plan 1/4 inch, you know, you're using this for the noted first floor plan here. So just changing the name a little bit to specify this particular variation of the floor plan. So in terms of the template, well, I'll just sort of jump into that, and then we'll come back to some of the things about what was most interesting and challenging about the project. But in terms of the template, I know you've been using MasterTemplate for a while. Is it been something that you felt simplifies your work? Do you have to sort of add on a lot to it, or are you using it fairly closely to the original with just some small additions?
Well, for the most part, initially I you know, followed the MasterTemplate, and as I've grown with the template and understand the template more, I customize it more and more for my specific purposes. This particular project, I think I had just gotten into MasterTemplate when I did this particular project. I maybe had it a year or two, because this project started in 2014. We went into construction 2016. It was completed 2018, and so initially, like going into a project like this of this magnitude, there was quite a learning curve with the MasterTemplate, and but I did kind of discover how I could how to work with it and how to customize it for my specific needs, particularly with this complex of a project. But now what I do with MasterTemplate, when the new version, and we get a new version of ArchiCAD, a new version of MasterTemplate comes out, I sort of sit down and I really set it all up with my logo, with my specific office standards, and I take the time on the template. I didn't do that initially because I didn't really understand the whole concept of the template until I really got to working in it, especially with a project like this. But now I really take the time, and I encourage everybody who's whether you're new at MasterTemplate or not, is to really take the time to set up the template. Initially, it saves a lot of time. But the other thing that I have noticed with my projects as they evolve, as I'm building them, I follow the structure of how things are labeled in MasterTemplate, even though I may be having to create folders and sheets specific to the project itself.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very common story to start out with something and not quite know how to use it, then get comfortable with it, and then feel like, it's a springboard for you just to customize further. And in fact, that's exactly the idea, is that you use it as a foundation and then freely add on to it as you need to and just make it fully your own. So I'm just flipping now through the sheets here. What would be, some of the things that were the most challenging for the actual project design and the documentation or modeling? And then separately, what were some of the most satisfying things? Like, oh, I've got that really nice. They might be the same thing, challenging and satisfying off and on.
Are you talking specifically about working with ArchiCAD or with MasterTemplate? Or just
any of the above. The challenges of the site and just the project from a design perspective, and or the modeling, working in ArchiCAD or documenting, and
the modeling for this particular project was quite involved, and at a certain point, because of the time frame, I realized, okay, I can't keep modeling all the little details as much as I would have liked to, but I did do a lot of detail modeling on this. What I love about the way you've set up MasterTemplate are for the most part, I don't touch any of the line weights. There's only a few that I will change if they're not quite, again, it'll be project specific where I'll go in and maybe switch out a pen. But overall, I'm really happy with the graphics and how I can really get my graphics the way I want them with the MasterTemplate. And this particular project, I think because of the level of accuracy that I had to have for the city, the modeling was the most challenging, to making sure that I really had the modeling down. I did generate, I used, extensively the modeling tools, even for the setting up my framing. I went in and framed things, and as close as possible. But at a certain point, it was like, okay, have to stop, have to finish the working drawings. And
right. So in terms of modeling, I want to look at the framing in a second, but I did want to point this out. So you have, this wall, which is cut around, well, it's obviously arc wall, but cut on a uniform slope along with this railing. Now, this was done in an earlier version of ArchiCAD. So what do you think this element here is? It's a spiral. It's just a one of the library parts that you can use for a tubular shape. This one in the back here, which I'll highlight, is called a curved ramp. So there is an object in the library here that you can see could be used for a vehicle ramp, but by changing the dimensions of it, you can end up with something that is just a flat, thin, in this case, the bottom support for that railing. Now, what you used here to cut the top off this wall was a version of the ramp. So basically that ramp object just set up, to go from one height to another and follow that exact curve and use that as a solid element operation to trim off the top. So very clever use of the tools to create something that, you know, when you look at it, just goes, oh, okay, that's a nice design feature. So let's look at the framing. Where would we see the framing? In just one of the sections? Would that be where?
Yeah, if you go to the well, yeah, now I'm not quite sure what you'd have to turn on. I mean, the sections, I might have, that one might be a good one. No, that's not good. Go to the number one. Go to number one. That'll be a better section.
Number one, okay.
Or that's a good one too. Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, here's number one, and I'll just zoom in on this. And by the way, if anyone has any questions for Kaitlyn, please feel free to type them in either to the GoToWebinar area or the Slack area. So I do see a comment from Dave Olaf saying, "Kaitlyn, beautiful drawings!" exclamation mark. So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now it looks like we've got, you know, some framing elements here. Now this, these elements.
Those are 2D parts. Those are
right. Okay.
That I went in and just used to enhance, to detail out the drawings.
Mm-hmm. So you have a spiral stair as well. So you're working with spirals here. And anything else just in terms of the modeling that was, you know, you had to really work at and ended up?
The roof, the way the tower, the curved element, you know, intersecting, getting that all accurate, you know, with the roof tool, and if you go up to the top of the, just how that intersected, you know, making sure that that was all really correct. Again, a lot of this was due to make sure that I wasn't exceeding height limits, and just really looking at the to graphically define it so that the contractors understood exactly what was going on in this area. Because sometimes, I mean, the roof tool I think has gotten a lot better in ArchiCAD now than what it even was in this version. But now it's you know, you can really meet those intersection points much better.
Right. Right, beautiful. So let's see if there's any comments in the Slack. Let's see, that's sort of hidden here. Okay. So Ken asks, what library do you utilize for the roof tiles?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think this one is just a pattern. It's a what do you call it? A texture. This one's just a texture that I put on here onto the, you know, because I was showing the thickness of the roof tile, but it doesn't. It's just a texture from, and I can't remember if it's something that I had from.
So you've got it set to use building materials, which means that if we look at the, okay, this is actually, okay, you've got this, this particular piece is just the thickness of the roof tile. So the roof tiles, if we go into here.
Yeah, that's just a surface. And the reason I did it that way was because I knew that my tile had a certain thickness. And again, this was all to make sure I wasn't exceeding heights. So I just, I put down my underlayments, and, you know, I built up the roof the way it would actually be built.
Okay, so you've got an image file here that you use, and obviously it's tastefully, it's got variations that are tasteful.
Now I know where it comes from. This is actually from the manufacturer. This was from Redlands Tile. It's actually their image off of their. I would take the image off of their website, off of their information, and use it as a texture.
Great. Awesome.
And that applied also to the limestone we put on the house and the other stone things. I actually took those textures, you can kind of see them, and just brought them in so that
So when you bring it in, as a technical note, bringing in an image, setting the scale, so 16 feet across, you can calculate how many roof tiles there are and make sure it's accurate or as close as you need for visual representation.
Right.
And it has to be one that would seamlessly repeat. So in other words, the left side here and the right side should nicely connect so you don't see a seam. And so if you got it from the manufacturer and they had it that way, that is, so convenient. You were mentioning, what was the other one that, granite or something?
Yeah, there was a lime. Yeah, if you go to the I think there's a surface for the limestone.
Limestone Hudson. So the name of the project is Hudson. And
Right.
okay, so here's the texture. Yeah, looks very.
And we use that on the exterior wall. So.
Right.
And then a lot of times
we can see. Whoops, that here, yeah. that texture.
Exactly.
And then we've got some other nice delineation here.
Right.
So yeah, beautifully modeled. Obviously, facing very important restrictions in terms of height, in terms of the floor area. Coming out with a design that has a beautiful sense of balance, and imagine how has this already been built?
Yeah, it's complete. It was completed in February, March of 2018.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, excellent. So what are you working on right now in terms of the next projects on your plate?
So I'm just wrapping up a 15-unit townhome project that I designed here in Bentonville, and was the developer on as well as the architect. And currently I am also the contractor because I'm finishing out. We had just a few left to finish out and the contractor was too busy, so I took on that role of finishing the white box units. And then I've got some really neat commercial work here for an artist retreat center that I'm doing. It's kind of cool. And having a lot of fun with the sort of Ozark vernacular that's in this area. And it's just different from Southern California. So it's, I'm having a lot of fun with rusted metal, just playing with that. So it's pretty
interesting.
Cool. Yeah.
Great. Let's see if there's any last questions before we move on. So Ken Brooks says, very well managed complex project, Caitlin. So great. Lawrence Brill from Down Under says, do you use CAD image coverings to generate all your 3D roof elements, gutters, ridges, cappings, downspouts?
Yes, I do use CAD image. Yes, I like their add-ons a lot. So I do use CAD image.
Okay, all right. Well,
now I don't know that I used it on this one. I don't know that I used it for these roof coverings, but I do use that more and more in my work now.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today and for sharing the project, allowing us to take a tour of it. And
you're welcome. It's great. Love MasterTemplate. So thank you. Because I know that's a lot of hard work too. So.
Yeah, definitely a labor of love, and just continuing year upon year, just sort of seeing how to make it keep developing. So I think we'll shift gears. Let's see. I think Lou is up on deck here, and let me switch over to Lou's project here. Oh, by the way, so Caitlin, what is your website? We want to put that on there.
KaitlinKellyArchitect.com.
Okay, so I'll post that. Let's see. So here
I can type it in if you need me to.
Okay, great. So I'll just put it in. So Kaitlin Kelly Architect singular.
Singular.com, and then for the develop, I'll send you the for the development work that I'm doing. I'll send you that website too, where people can take a look at the.
So I've just put in the that information into the questions area in both Slack and in the GoToWebinar. So anyone who wants to check out more of your work and possibly cooperate with you on a project or something, can reach you. All right, so we'll move on. Lou, let's see, there you are. Your microphone is open, Lou.
Yep, it's good to see you, Eric.
All right, so you want to try your webcam just one more time, just in case now it's working?
Well, there it is. So,
all right.
Much as we've worked on trying to get it going.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Sometimes it's just like, let's try one more time. Okay, all right. So Lou, I've known you for quite a few years because you're also from Southern California, and you were working at one point with the other reseller, John Stebbins, down there. So we've known each other since the mid-90s, and now you're up in my area, very, within half an hour or so. Tell us a little bit about your background and how long you've been working with ArchiCAD.
Well, I was fortunate to get started with the first Windows version of ArchiCAD 4.16 back in 1994, and we found finding you and other people that were in the business that had a great sense of what it takes to put a project together made a real change in my life. I also had a friend that joined the firm back in the day. We did a big casino project that worked out really well, including in the day when you had somebody up in Santa Barbara make videos for you because you couldn't make them out of ArchiCAD. But I've been at it for that length of time. I've been a licensed architect in California since 1971, so I've been around a lot of years. Mm-hmm. And this particular house is kind of a simplified version of the kind of house that Caitlyn was doing. She did a marvelous job on that one with all the restrictions she was under. This one didn't have as many restrictions, but it was sitting on top of a mountain out here between Santa Rosa and Calistoga. And people wanted a very expensive looking house without spending any money. So that was the challenge to begin with.
Yeah, so you refer to it as a budget McMansion.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, because it's a big house, 5,800 square feet.
And it's a fire rebuild, right? It
is a fire replacement, yes it is. And so it's an interesting house for a couple.
This one of the things that you said that you were very pleased about was that you were able to take the initial measurements from the person who had started working on the project but was pushed aside, or you took over from, and you were able to put the model together within about like 4 or 5 days or something?
I actually went back and rechecked my timing for that. So yes, I put in less than 40 hours to put the project back in a model form, and ultimately did the entire project through the county in 199 man hours. So it's pretty much of a budget for sure.
Right. Okay. So definitely you've figured out how to focus on the essentials with ArchiCAD, get it done, get the drawings in, and get the approval. Obviously, with the fire rebuild, the urgency there. These are people who are out of a home. I'm sure they've found somewhere to live temporarily, but they want that home again as soon as possible.
Yeah, this is the 7th of the houses that I put in for the burn victims in the Totus fire that occurred in Santa Rosa in 2017.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm going to flip through some of the just the sheets, and tell me when there's something that's sort of interesting, that you'd like to zoom in on. So here's the site. So you said it's on top of a mountain?
Yes, it is on top of a mountain, and it was real interesting trying to find enough contour data from a survey created on the entire property, which is over 20 acres, and most of it is going downhill. And so it was a difficult, not in terms of difficulty, but in terms of time spent to generate the kind of image needed in order to get the views and the other things that the owners could understand.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things you mentioned here was that you were just pleased that you were able to have different variations of, let's say, the floor plan where it's simple and easy to read. On the other hand, have variations where there's a lot more data, just changing some of the view settings and working with them. So obviously we have a dimension floor plan here versus the simplified one.
Yeah, the joy of that is that MasterTemplate allows for the flexibility to do that kind of stuff, so that you can have a piece of paper that goes out to the site that somebody can look at and find the imagery that they need to have for their particular trades, because this is a trades-based project.
So as we look at the elevation, I remember, Lou, you came to me with the question of how to model this element in here. So you have, we'll go back to the 3D view and take a look at this, because this was one of the things you said was most challenging and then was quite satisfying just to get it working. So let's just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you recall getting in touch with you because I had been spending an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how to do it, and the relative simplicity when you got on board, and in an hour, less than an hour, we did the whole thing. So it kind of makes it important that not only MasterTemplate is a great tool to use, but Eric Bobrow is an even better tool.
Thank you, Lou. So I'll just briefly explain sort of the basic tools that are in use here. So you've got an object, the molding straight is just one of the objects in the library, and you can pick it from a variety of, let's say this, probably profiles. You can set up, dimensions and the cutoff ends. So these are going to be mitered here to fit around the corner, and then stretched to fit. So these are going horizontally and they work very nicely. You then put a little slab piece on top of it, in part to finish off this shape, but also because it became a convenient tool for solid element operations here with the Morph Tool. So the Morph Tool, I won't get into demonstrating it today, but what we worked out, and this was one of those things that when Lou brought the question to me, I went, let me see. And we tried actually 2 or 3 different ways to do it, and the Morph Tool seemed to be ultimately the simplest. So basically with the Morph Tool, you can take existing forms and rotate them or do other things. So one possibility is you actually create these moldings on the floor, on the ground, where using, let's say, for example, these, the moldings here, then you convert it into a morph and just flip it up. Another possibility is that you actually take the profile shape and extrude it. And when you do that, you're essentially creating an axis line, and you can then turn a corner and use the tube option in the morph to basically have a nice clean corner as it goes around. And so I can't remember which one we ended up with. This is a morph, but it was then trimmed by the, what do you call it? This slab.
It's a cap piece.
Yeah. So yeah, so that was an interesting way, and once it was figured out, of course, it was easy to clone them around and create something that worked in the whole context. There was something else that you talked about. Oh, the spiral stair, I recall, was another one that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see Caitlyn's version of it, and then be aware that hers went from left to right, and mine goes from right to left. But doing a similar kind of thing in a later version of ArchiCAD.
So if we look at this just in the interior in 3D here, so I'm going to take a marquee and say show what's inside the marquee in 3D. Now initially it won't have all the layers because I'm on the floor plan, so I'll need to switch the layers from the construction document plan to the model. And we'll just do model building only, probably because we don't need to see the site. And so that brings in some of the ceiling information that wasn't there on the plan. So you were saying that creating the staircase itself wasn't that hard, but the stringer was a challenge, and the stringer actually is, what'd you say? It's like a huge cost to get this spiral stringer.
There are two stringers, and they're each a 9-inch, 13-pound channel. And the first bid came in at $73,000 for the 2 channels and the railing. And the second bid came in at $38,000 for the 2. And so we're in the process of trying to revise how you build the stair and maybe see if we can make a budget out of it.
Yeah. So
the concept of the stair, however, is straight out of the stair tool. In fact, almost everything in the project is a tool and or a library part that is stock in the program, which if you're trying to do production stuff in relatively short budgets, it's a real help to try to be able to create something that's a little unusual.
Right. So, and this is done with the new railing tool, and so it basically is just getting the settings to have the design attached to the stair and the right dimensions for all of the balusters and things. So nicely done, and trying to figure out now how you can get it to fit into the budget is a good challenge.
It's always a challenge. You can do all kinds of designs, but if you can't afford to pay for it, something doesn't get done. I hope to be able to. I've created a concept to do the stringers out of glued and screwed laminated pieces of 3/8 plywood, put together with building a temporary wall of shoring like they used to build domes in Italy back in the 1300s, and try to do something to hold things together and be able to form the 2 channels. So it's been an interesting project and an interesting job.
So you're making good use of some of the 3D abilities of ArchiCAD in the documentation. So just taking a 3D view, saving it as a 3D document, and then adding notes on top of it. And this view would be live, so if you were to update the model, change some things, then this would stay current. And obviously, deriving some noted, enlarged views of the plan, of the stair, and I guess you have some more details of the stringer. So this is actually, so this is the structural stuff behind the ornamental cover. And this is what is the stair section here. I was interested in this one. And I'm trying to zoom in on it. My mouse is not cooperating. There we go. So we've got the actual stair tread and the all the supports. And so this is generated, pretty much from a section of the model and just with notes on it.
Yes, that's it's just a cut through with a little bit of managing the 2D elements that are there after it becomes a single drawing. So that someplace where you could get, if you're in a circular situation, very difficult to explain, well, this piece goes here and that piece goes there, and you give them a picture and the guy in the field can actually put it together. So trying to get enough information on the plans to help a relatively capable contractor get it done. I'm sorry about the phone call.
It's all right. It's all right. So I guess let's see if anyone has any questions, because we'll be moving on shortly. I'm going to ask you, while people pause and possibly type in something, how have you felt the template has been for working in your project? Is it something that you've needed to modify a lot, or just simply add on here and there? How has it been?
It's been relatively easy to use the pieces of the program to make all kinds of things, including insertion of PDFs on manufacturer's literature and also to do customized things like the stairway. But in doing all of the things that has been my practice since I'm a relatively production-oriented person, it's a simple matter of trying to put all of ArchiCAD to use in ways that you don't use all the time when you do something a little different. This has turned out pretty good. And I've taught myself a little bit about the MEP tools, by the way.
Okay, so this is actually an MEP model that we're, if we were to look in 3D at these materials.
That's correct. If you hold on,
I'm going to go to the source view here, which now is on the plan. So now we're in just the floor plan, and now we are seeing the walls as well as this, but we're seeing nothing else. So if I go with a marquee around this is one way to do it, to say I'd like to look at these things with this particular layer setting, and I go to 3D now, we should see, well, we can see now, at least up on certain areas that are exposed, the HVAC. If I go down, because we didn't have the roofs showing, of course, if I go back to the this here and we do it with a thin marquee, then it will only show the one story. And now we're seeing
it's the foundation vents, the vents in the floor, and the ductwork to take care of it.
Right. So yeah, different ways to visualize it, and obviously getting nice clean drawings out of that. And that's done using ArchiCAD's Graphisoft standard HVAC or MEP add-on.
That's correct. Really good program, very easy to do HVAC, plumbing, and I have not ever used it for electrical because I've done everything from the base program. But that's a new one that gets challenged one of these days when I get a house to do.
Right. Okay. Well, let's see. I don't see any questions that have been typed in. I'm not quite sure what to think of that. I'm glad that you've been able to share this. Obviously, some projects are more high design and high budget, and you can make something really fancy, and others, you just got to get the work done, and efficiency and being able to get it through the building department are, what the client is paying for. So, I'm glad that you got a nice chunk of work from the fire rebuilds. You said that there was another one that was sort of coming up that you're going to be meeting on?
Yeah, I have another one that you helped me on that's coming up to the building department. Hopefully it was yesterday and the day before and last week, but it isn't here yet. I'm waiting for a design review letter from the soil engineer. As soon as that's here, I can go to the county and maybe get that one permitted as well, which is a lot nicer design in a very nice area. So,
right. Okay. Well, we'll move on. I see some comments now. Alan Flankman says, have never attempted a spiral staircase, much less one with changing geometry. Okay, so yeah, it is. I guess it's as a design element, you have to work out details, and you also have to accommodate the cost of it. And of course,
just as a comment on that, the stair program does this thing. I did the stairway, and I don't think it was 30 minutes to put the thing together. Once you put in the parameters, the program builds a stair for you. You just have to assign what's needed, and now you can divide off risers from treads and make different materials and do all kinds of other things. The only thing it doesn't do for you is trim it out the way that most people would like to have it. But you can even figure that out if you spend enough time doing the etching of the treads and all that sort of stuff. But
yeah, if I select the stair here, and we just open up its settings, basically using the stair tool that was introduced into 21 and refined in 22, you're setting the width, the number of steps, the rise here, and certain rules for that, and you're determining the structure. So this is, a structure with a beam support as opposed to monolithic precast or some side stringers here. And you're determining then, what is the profile of the beam. And so here's the actual profile that's being used, and you can create your own. There are some pre-built, and you're saying, what type of finish the treads and the risers are. So you're basically putting all of that in, and then the blue line that we see bumping along here on the plan is just going to be an arc, and simply taking what would be a straight line and curving it, just like curving any edge, allows you to make it sort of an arbitrary radius or a very specific measured, it's going to be such and such a radius.
There is a circular setting in the stair dialog that you just put in the specifics of the radius that you want to have in and out, or the run on the inner side of the treads.
Mm-hmm.
This one complies with the 9 inches minimum in the code, so it makes everything look pretty good. And then with the
so the rules that you have here. So we're talking about tapered tread width. So minimum in this case 10 inches. So it's figuring out that the tread, even though it tapers, it wouldn't let you go below whatever the rule that you've set here.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Lou. Let's see, there's a couple other comments. So Mark Wren says, we may have just said it, but how did you do the duct work? So you want to just talk for a minute on that?
It's relatively easy. You buy the MEP add-on to ArchiCAD, put it in, and it has a whole package of every conceivable duct configuration you could imagine: squares, rectangles, rounds, flexibles, and all kinds of other stuff. And you just figure out the size and away you go, because it's nothing more than pieces they're individual pieces, and you just stick them next to each other, and they're fully adjustable, and you can transitions, and it's got every single part that you could possibly want to have in an air conditioning system. So it's relatively easy. I'm not a genius on this stuff. This is relatively putting it step 1, step 2, and you get something done.
Yeah, so I'll just point out that I don't have the MEP add-on, so the library parts are showing up just as objects, and you could literally just take one after another and stack them in a line, and put in separate pieces for the changing direction and transitions, etc. But with the MEP add-on, you're actually drawing essentially a line, a path, and then at various points saying, oh, I need to reduce this, or it's going to terminate, or it's going to branch off. So you're working with it in more of a system fashion when you have the add-on. I don't know what the cost of the add-on is. I mean, I recall it was $1,000 or some number of hundreds of dollars, but that's, if you want to have these, definitely it'll save so much time. And then you can actually literally pull these and stretch them, and they will keep connected. Whereas right now, if I were to do something here, it would just sort of move the individual components. So that's called MEP, Mechanical Electrical Plumbing add-on for ArchiCAD. Available from your ArchiCAD dealer or reseller. All right, Jeff Robinson says, could I see the overall 3D of the job, please? Yeah, okay, you joined late, so we'll just go out here. Double click here. Take this back to the original. So here we have it on top of a mountain, so all sloping down from the peak, and the sort of mass and sort of trying to be impressive without spending a lot of money on detailing.
That is the key to doing it in housing.
So let's see, Alan asks, can ArchiCAD provide a decent input file for a CNC machine to cut layers for a glue lam stringer? I imagine so. I haven't looked at that specifically, but it's definitely, you would take the precise 3D model to another tool that would then create the CNC instructions. So CNC, I can't remember what the acronym is, but I believe it's computer numeric cutting or something. Anyway, it would take the precise model and convert it into instructions for things being fabricated. So
actually you can do that anytime with a glue lam, but the cost is about like the same with the 9-inch, 13-pound channels, steel stringers that we use. So trying to find another way to do it is always a different challenge.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Ken says, Lou, do you utilize manual J calculations to determine duct sizes?
No, I have an old thing that I learned when I was a in the days of hand drafting, it's called a ductilator. And you can get the cubic footage needed for an individual room with a volume of the furnace, and you calculate down what the duct size is going to be for a bathroom or for a kitchen or a bedroom or whatever. And you just pull the ductilator out and it gives you the size that you want to have and the velocity and that sort of stuff, and it works pretty fast. Because with MEP, you can pick those things up and it goes right into the program easily and does its job.
Mm-hmm. So Steve has a comment. In the end, the best result is to get the building permit and get paid. So you're.
Believe it or not, I was paid 2 days after I finished the job.
Okay. All right. Well, Lou, thanks again for sharing this file and giving us a glimpse into at least one example of your work. And yeah, we'll move on if that's okay with you.
Thank you for the privilege.
Yeah. All right. Great. So we'll welcome to the stage Gerald Hoffman, and I'll switch over to, let's see, I guess we'll start with the Dumper Kid project here. So Gerald, you want to put on your webcam and say hello?
Hello.
There you are.
Hello.
Hey. All right. So we got a glimpse of you earlier when we were talking about the quantity and estimating course and this project that we will look at actually in a little bit of detail in a few minutes. This one is, I think, I wanted to show this immediately just because I'm impressed, not just with the modeling. I mean, yes, the modeling is good and the design, I know you had a lot to consider, but the communication with the different color coding just helps really to understand what's going on. I'll just zoom in on this so one can see this. So you've got some different, the trusses and the different members. Even though they're not red and green and yellow, it just helps to see the systems. And I thought that was really cleverly done.
Yeah, in this case, the roof was quite complicated. If it's just a simple roof on a house, I don't go into this kind of detail. And this one, I'm always thinking of the builder, because at the end of the day, he has to be able to build this thing and ask me as few questions as possible during the process, because I'm busy with other things. And I really don't like getting calls from the guy on the site saying, what's going on here? So to me, it's I really get some satisfaction out of doing my drawings so that the builder, I'm considered a builder's designer in a sense by some of the guys that I work for or get referrals from. And it's kind of, it gives me some pleasure to figure out how to illustrate drawings so that people can build them without too many questions.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about, your work and how long you've been using ArchiCAD and all of that.
So I've been using ArchiCAD, I guess, about 25 years, since version 4.55. I had a buddy who was the ArchiCAD dealer actually in Western Canada at the time. And I was using a program called SoftPlan because I was employed by somebody who used that program, and they basically did single family residential, and that's what I was doing, and learned my trade doing that with an Australian architect who had moved to Canada and decided to do single family residential. So I eventually went out on my own, and I'm self-employed at this point. I have tried hiring people and had a small office for a while, and over the years, I probably did that for 4 or 5 years, and then have gone back to doing it on my own. I've employed a couple of contract workers using Teamwork on a couple of jobs that were large, and I needed help to kind of get the production done. But for the most part, I do stuff on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So this house was a house for a couple of young doctors. They wanted something fairly modern. It's a waterfront property, fairly high up, steep bank going down the front.
So this is the water here, Departure Bay.
Yeah, and it overlooks, for anybody that's been on Vancouver Island, it overlooks Departure Bay, of course, and that's where all the ferries, one of the ferries anyway, that comes into Nanaimo, comes in and out past their house, so you can see them anyway.
Mm-hmm. So here's the steep slope, and then the water is out here.
Right? Water's basically at the bottom contour there, without the skirt, right there at the bottom one there. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the challenge. Obviously, it's a steep slope, and so that means structural and engineering type challenges, and as well as just the layout and circulation.
Yeah, and getting it is a single level home, although there's a walkout base. It's a 2-level home, but basically the living, most of the living was on the main floor. So the challenge was on a steep site to achieve that, and it has a full walkout basement with a lot of rooms at the water view side that look out over the water. But the master bedroom, the 2 kids' rooms, a den, and all the living spaces are actually contained on the main floor. So to go downstairs is just for extra stuff, and then create kind of a flat living space outside of the house. And that retaining wall that you see is actually right on a covenant line that's a restrictive covenant from the water. So it's a distance from the shoreline, and I couldn't go past that. Basically. Right. So the house is defined at that end, and then the side yards, I'm basically right out to the edges of the side yards, and the height restriction, I think within a couple of inches of maximum height. So I haven't done a lot of modeling as far as doing renderings and that sort of thing, because the client was able to visualize from this much work of what they wanted to see. And as Lou said, it's all about budget with the client as well. So yeah, it's always a trade-off on how much modeling I do and where you have to draw the line. I mean, it would be nice to go on and do a fully detailed model that is totally finished with every little nook and cranny. But usually the budget and what the client can afford and that they want to start building gets in the way of that. And then you're on to the next job, and you haven't got time to go back and fiddle with it.
Now, you mentioned 2 design areas. I mean, 2 areas that required some extra design in order to get the result that you wanted, and I thought they were very interesting. So one had to do with this walkout deck and how you had to structure it so that there wouldn't be water, since this is a very rainy area, and yet it could be easily walked out as opposed to having it down. And then the other was this roof line here, where you actually slanted it into the building to provide more visibility from the inside. And yet then you had to work out how the water would drain. So tell us a little bit about those 2 parts of the design.
Well, the deck, the client really wanted a walkout flush deck. And in British Columbia, where I live, the code here in Canada is that we have to have a minimum of 6 inches drop at the door down to any patio deck like that to prevent water, obviously, from building up and coming into the house. So one method of achieving this flush deck is that it was constructed with a floor framing system that would be typical of any deck, except it's set down from the floor level by 6 inches or so nominally, and it has a slope built into it that slopes towards the outside underneath, and then that is a torch-on roof membrane is applied to that, and there's a curb on the front side. You can probably see it there, and then I haven't put all the little support pucks, but basically then there's adjustable pucks that sit on that roof deck and support these pavers, and then you can level them all out so that they're perfectly level, even though the roof, your patio deck is sloping to the outside. And then there's drains that are basically at the inside of the parapet, so you don't see those. Well, you do see them eventually, they come down. But
so you're doing all of the framing here in 3D. I can see the TJI and the just these other framing members. So this, you said this was a very satisfying detail, but an expensive one to create.
It is expensive. Well, you're basically building two patios because you have to have a roof membrane on your framing, and then you're supporting a whole nother. In this case, I think they used 24-inch square granite pavers, and then they're all supported. And the pucks that support these things, other people have probably seen these things. You can do wood on them as well. There's a small gap, about 1/8 of an inch between each of the pavers, so the water just goes right down through. You never see it. It never pools at all, and it's a lovely finished deck, and the client doesn't know what's underneath, really. He doesn't care. But it's an expensive a deck, but it's, you know, if it's in the budget, you can, it's a nice thing to have.
Yeah, what was the total budget on this project?
I believe at the end, it was around close to 2 million, I think, not including land. Of course, they had purchased the land before. And it's a bare lot. And quite a bit of that, it was originally supposed to come in at 1.5. And the client, as in most cases, finishes tend to drive the cost up. And they had chosen some more expensive finishes. They put a nano wall door in that living room there, and those are pretty expensive. So it all adds up.
Mm-hmm. So here we have that other detail that you had talked about. So the roof is actually sloping back towards the house to provide better visibility, because this is prime looking out at the lake.
Well, actually at the ocean. It's at the ocean in this case. But yes, and if I had had that large of a roof, or that long of a roof sloping down, it would have been the overhang eave would have been down below the head height of the door, which would have really shielded from light and all that kind of thing from the inside of the house. So I back sloped the roof and then created an inside gutter. Now I did with the builder, we worked out a more elaborate detail of sort of flashing and all that kind of thing later. This was just modeled fairly accurately, but just to show where this would go. We were concerned about, it does snow sometimes in this location, so we were concerned about snow building up there and or the drains becoming clogged and then water building up in that area. So the builder put in, it has 2 rainwater leaders on that one piece of roof. And we put in some kind of a visual sight gauge, which doesn't show up in my model, but on the outside in the downpipe itself, where the client can quickly check if it's raining really hard or that sort of thing. He can check whether water is coming down there. And if it's not, he knows he has to go up on the roof and clean out the drains or get the snow off. Yeah, you can see the angle there pretty well.
Yeah. So you mentioned some design considerations that took some creative thinking, the modeling. Obviously, you're a master at just putting a detailed model with all the framing and considerations to make it easy for anyone, you know, the contractor as well as lay people, to understand how everything is connected. Anything else in terms of just the design that was, you know, particularly interesting or challenging?
Well, this one, as the design part too, because the lot kept sloping, although it eased up on the slope a little bit, by the time we got up to the access to the garage, it was quite a bit higher than the main floor elevation of the house. So, and I had to come up with, part of the design was getting a garage in that they wanted actually storage for kayaks that could go into the garage. So it's a vaulted ceiling in the garage as well. And we put in hangers at the higher end of it. And that's a little storage cubby on the closest on the right-hand side there. That's a storage area that's attached to the garage as well. And then that sloped roof piece that you're looking straight on there is the stairwell that comes down to the level of the house. And I wanted to interconnect the roofs and have that all work together, and the roof with the roof that goes into the back door from the garage. And it also connects to the front entry roof along that side, and all of those slopes working together. And that's all framed with timber beams. And So it worked out very well. It was actually, but that was challenging, but also rewarding to get it to work. So there was a lot of levels and things that had to be kind of thought about on the site.
Right. Yeah, so I remember seeing, let's see, the main floor and deck. So yeah, so obviously all of these carefully conceived excerpts showing systems and
yeah, if you want to zoom into that one. So I sort of color coded this one a little bit too. So the main floor was all framed with TJIs, but if your flooring, in this case, you can see that note that there's makeup joists on the 2x10 joist. So the deck is actually with 2x10s and they're colored blue in this case. And that, as you can see, they're set down from the main floor there. That I had to, part of the kitchen juts out over the deck, and that's that little orange corner there. And you can't, because they're not rated for exterior moisture content and stuff, the TJIs can't be extended to the exterior conditions in BC where we live. So those little joists were all put on top of the 2x10s to get them up to the level of the TJIs and match them there. So I just thought this was a very good way to explain that to the builder, and it's very difficult with notes to kind of try and do that in 2D.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So I do see some questions that people have been typing in, and so I'll try to integrate them in as we look at this. Now you had some that were, I think, the 3D view. Well, there's the 3D view of
these are all the same view, but just different angles so that people can, the guy can see at different sort of what's going on.
But wasn't there something where you had some odd shaped walls in the corner?
Oh yeah, that was probably in one of the views, Eric. It was on one of the, not on the sheet. I don't think it was later on in the design, in the build, and the builder did call me up and he said, how high are these walls here? Garage walls, I think it was up there.
3D documents here, okay, so.
Yeah, 3D walls maybe?
Yeah, there we go, okay, yeah.
So this was down that sloping stairwell from the garage down to the door that came out.
So basically a detail to help them
figure out the walls.
Yeah, lay that out. So these are all 3D documents, and just for those of you who maybe are a little less familiar with this part of ArchiCAD, you can take any 3D view, whether it's the whole model or certain layers, certain stories, marquee, anything, and you can convert it into a 3D document that you can then annotate. And so, of course, these ones don't have annotation, but some of them, do, of course, have labels, and some will have dimensions on there. So these are originally 3D views converted into a document that you can actually annotate with the 2D tools. Yeah, garage walls. Yeah, so here's some just really, not the type of detail that you would see in any 2D set,
Right, and these were just put onto, I just printed them out on 8.5 by 11 and emailed them to the builder.
Right.
The guy that was on site, because he asked me for the stuff, and that's all he really wanted.
Yeah, so, all right, let's see some questions here. How is the standing seam roof sheathing modeled?
That's with a CAD image cladding. And if you go into the, I don't know if you can select that, but you could see it more. Remember that last night we did a section there. So that's the cladding, and it does a decent standing seam roof, which is probably the biggest reason why I would keep the other claddings I've done with CAD image as well. But sometimes it does some funny things where you're, like this was an angled fascia board, and CAD image didn't really know how to treat that properly. So this was the best I could do with that. Because it wants to call it a hip or a gable or something. And when roofs get a bit irregular, then sometimes it doesn't really know how to deal with it. But
So for those of you who don't know, CAD image makes a variety of add-ons for ArchiCAD. They were probably are still closely associated with the distributor of ArchiCAD in New Zealand, although that company now has been purchased by the Australian distributor, and they handle both countries. But CAD image makes some add-ons, and so there are things that you can buy. In this particular case, the coverings one, we'll use a technology built into ArchiCAD where you draw a basic shape like a roof, and then you say, please cover it with something. And the rules for the covering are flexible, and you can have, you know, parts of the wall with wainscoting or with brick or things added on. And of course, the roof's not only standing seam, but beautifully detailed tile and other options. And then if you change the roof shape, it actually updates, so it's associated. So there is a cost, but it does work nicely.
Yeah, although I purchased it way back when you actually just purchased it with the version of ArchiCAD that you had, and that it was a perpetual license for that version. There was no fees after that. And they went from that, and you could keep that if you were already on that, but now they do a rental. So you pay for the use of the tool, but the advantage is that you can actually rent the tool to do a project. And then once you've done the project, you can stop paying the rent. And those you can still open the project, look at everything. You just can't edit things unless you want to pay again that month or whatever. So you do have the option of even renting a tool or two and then using it for a project and then stop paying for whatever period of time you don't need it. So
right.
That's kind of handy if you need something for one specific job.
Mm-hmm.
And their doors and windows I've thought were always very superior to what ArchiCAD was offering at the time. And I haven't even tried ArchiCAD recently, and they may be quite a bit better now. But all of these are CAD image doors and windows. I haven't really come across anything that I couldn't produce fairly accurately, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is something that would be hard to do in the standard ArchiCAD windows as a single unit. You could potentially have a center one ganged with two side ones and create something like that. You could do it with the curtain wall tool. Then it wouldn't be a window, it would just be an opening with a piece of curtain wall looking like that. You know, so there are some options, but this is definitely, you know, nice. You can change the heights, you know, and obviously make trapezoidal windows and things like that easily. Another question related to this is, how do you model the wood siding? So where do we see wood siding? It's a little dark on this
There
side.
is some above the windows, so or above most of the window there. I have it tied into one of the.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's rather dark on my screen. When I'm moving in, it's clear, and then it darkens. So I've been trying.
It might be just where the sun.
Yeah, I go back here and rotate the sun around, and then also go to the sunlight and boost up the sunlight here. Then that's at least better, but it's still not the same as when I'm moving. When I'm moving here, you can see that it's much easier to see the contrast. When I let go, it darkens. Now, I guess it's probably in part because it's in shadow, so I need to go and turn my view just to there. That's actually a lot easier for visual.
Okay. Yeah. So that is also the cladding tool from CAD image.
Yeah. So it's basically follows the wall, and if you have windows, it'll cut around it, and you can say above this height it's something, below that height it's something, and then it's, if you stretch the wall, it'll follow the wall. All right. So Jeff Robinson asked, can I ask what was used to model the standing seam steel roofing, which we already talked about, is the CAD image coverings. So it's a tool called Coverings that handles walls and roofs, putting a covering on it.
Yeah, it does slabs too. I think you can cover slabs with it.
All right, and Chris Dvorak, nice to have you there. So I missed a little of the explanation, but how does Mr. Hoffman place the structural members? I've used the rafter add-on, but it doesn't always set them in the most logical way. So are you doing them one by one and repeating?
Yes, I do them by hand. It's not that much work once you get one placed and you copy them across, and then you have to do some adjustments if there's holes for stairwells and that sort of thing, adding double ones where you need to. And and it may or may not have been necessary in some of these places, but if you're gonna, the trouble with this one is if I started to model a roof, then I really had to do everything to make it look like it had actually been thought out. So once you start down that road, you really do have to keep going.
All right, so
those
manually
are, the
repeating.
TJIs are a free catalog that TrustJoist put out. So they actually have their stamp right on the side of them if you look out. And they stopped that in version 9, I think, of ArchiCAD, but they still work. And they have hangers and things like that.
So you can download the TrustJoist library.
Yeah, I don't know how you find it now, but it was free at the time, and I don't know if I haven't checked their website because I have it, but I don't know if it's still available or whether you could hunt around.
Okay, all right. Let's see, how do you color code the framing? So I guess what's your system here?
Well, it wasn't any, it was just arbitrary colors that I thought would illustrate something, and you just select the member and make it that color. It doesn't, for the overall model and sections and stuff, it doesn't matter that much. It was arbitrary. So
Okay. Does the roof have a drainage plane? Tom, Mark Kunis asks.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, all right, Tom, if you want to type in something to clarify your question about the drainage plane. Jerry Sperling says, were there design changes after you had extensively modeled the framing, and how did you handle that?
I worked out most of the roof just with simple roof slabs. When I'm doing the design, I just work with roof slabs and floor slabs really, until that's more or less sorted out. And then I get into the framing. There were some things when I got into the framing that I had to make some adjustments where some of the girder trusses went and that sort of thing, because I didn't obviously have that section worked out. If you look straight kind of just on the right hand side there, in behind those red trusses, there's a yellow truss, a flat top girder in there. It's a double member girder. And some of this information I wouldn't have had until I had my basic design out and finished. I basically send the layouts to the truss manufacturer who I work very closely with. And this flat top girder, this particular detail here, had to be of sufficient height, obviously, to provide the strength, but it also supported the top of the sloped TJIs that form part of the vaulted ceiling on one side, and then the trusses, the red trusses, which are just the common trusses, on the other side, which have a flat ceiling on the underside of those. So I wouldn't have known that information or whether that could actually be done until I sent it to the truss manufacturer, and then I get his design drawings back, and then I make some adjustments if I have to.
Right. And I'm noticing this detail here, which you had explained, is that the TJI are not able to go outside the building. So you have to actually switch the support to things that are weather resistant.
That's right. Yeah. So those 2x6s, I think those were, with strapping on top to tie into the top of the TGIs. And then I wanted a thinner profile too than just a big thick 14-inch TGI. I think they were 14-inch or 11 7/8 anyway. I wanted a thinner profile for the overhang for the fascia. So, and we had slope soffits on all of these.
One last question before we move on from this project, because we have the other project, which will be exciting to look at. What kind of drain from the under deck?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, the drainage, yes. So the deck that has the waterproof membrane, there would have been some scuppers in the side for overflow if the drains got clogged. And I didn't show them in this case, but there would have been a few overflow scuppers coming outside. And the drains themselves would have gone down through the membrane and roof deck with a little back sloping off of the parapet back to drains that were probably set in about 8 inches or something like that from the inside fascia of the parapet piece. And the top of the parapet basically comes up just above the deck level, the paver level.
Okay. So, and
There's
Tom,
a few things turned off on this. Remember, I don't know if you reset that. There's some foundation stuff turned off here because you're not seeing some of the concrete piers and.
I'm not, oh yeah, interesting. This is model building and site, but I guess there was some layers that you
I had switched some things late in the job to some other layers and stuff. I
right.
don't know.
See topo contours, I think.
No, that's not.
Structural, was it yes? Was it
Yeah,
structural?
it could have been.
Yeah, so in any event, I think we've seen plenty here. Oh, last question about MasterTemplate. Just you've been using MasterTemplate for a while, and you're using it on this project, and you're using it on a 10-story building. You know, how much do you have to modify it when you are dealing with this?
I don't modify it. It has a lot more than I actually use for most, certainly for single-family residential projects. I don't use half of the views and predefined things that are in the template, but I do use some, and I don't usually. I do add a few views if I need them for, you know. But basically, the format I stick to, and I. As we were discussing a little bit last night, I do add a couple of layers if I need extra layers to show certain things that I put in, because I do work out most of the framing. It's how I learned to do it, and it's a good exercise for me. It's how I like to work is that I do work out all the framing, or not all the framing. I don't put all the studs in the walls, but I do put lintels in the. You know, I know where they are, and I work all the loads down from the roof all the way to the foundation. So there's going to be no surprises
Right.
that I don't have bearing somewhere.
Right. Okay. So Tom Marcunas clarified about the drainage plan. He was asking about the airspace between standing seam metal roof and the substrate.
There's standing seam. Yeah, there was cross purlins on there. I think at the end of the day, we may have done spray foam insulation into the vaulted sections of this house because it's a simpler detail, and it's becoming a lot more common here and then you don't need an airspace. It forms the vapor barrier and solves that problem. So I think it will be building code at some point in Canada.
Let's see if I can get this cutting plane. I'm always a little bit unsure when I'm working, and I have delays. There we go. Okay, so.
No, I didn't model the insulation in these. Those were added in 2D in sections and things. I don't stick the insulation in. But.
Let's just see if I zoom in on this. Here we've got. All right, so. Okay, Green Duncan, I guess, any details, 2D detailing. So
no, I don't. I haven't done them here. I mean, these drawings I've been fortunate enough to get referrals from a master builder in the area, and he works out a lot of he has his own specific details for a lot of the things that he likes to do, and I trust him. He's one of those builders that you have to wait in line for a couple of years to get your house built, and people will do it, and they pay 20% extra to have the privilege. So it's because you have a really well built house, and he doesn't cut corners anywhere.
Right. Okay.
And if there is anything as we go through the job, then I get a call.
So Duncan comments with a smile. You mean a real builder thing?
Well, yeah, all builders should be that way, I suppose. It's true.
Yeah. So by the way, Jeff Robinson says, can we see what Gerald does use of the master template, please? Well, basically everything you're seeing is in the template. Very, very briefly, the template provides a structure for the view map and a structure for the layout book, a bunch of preset but customizable schedules, and sets of commonly used parts in the legend. Now, the legend is totally optional to use. If you want to eyedrop things and have quick access, you can use them, but it's just one part of the larger template. Do you use the legends at all?
I have tried in the past, just to kind of see how that could work into my system, but I do change some of your wall line thicknesses and stuff in composite walls and things. It's sort of the way I was taught. It's just where I put the accentuation on the thickness of lines and stuff. So I change some of those myself. So then I would have to go into the predefined ones and change all those, which I just haven't ever done. So.
Okay. So Jeff says, is it US based? So you're based in Canada.
I'm based in Canada, yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of MasterTemplate, I've got a metric version for all around the world.
We don't use metric in Canada for residential. The metric is the country is metricized, if that's what you want, if that's a word. But it's in any commercial institutional jobs, certainly if they're government contract jobs, would be in metric. But residential has never switched. And there was a period when the US was going to go metric and Canada was going to go metric, and it was supposed to happen together. So Canada ended up following through with that and the US backed out. So what happened was we supply a lot of lumber and plywood and things to the US, that we export a lot of materials. So they still had to export in imperial measure. And so our common building materials are still all standard measure imperial. Yeah, complicated.
Right, so we're going to shift gears. We're going to shift gears to Seacrest. So this is a wonderful contrast to what we've been looking at. So this is down in the tropics in Cayman Islands. Tell us a little bit about the project and how you have the opportunity to work on that.
Well, I met this, it's through a developer that I met. He was originally from Victoria, British Columbia on Vancouver Island, and that's where he grew up. His father was a builder there. And he and his brother ended up developing in the Cayman Islands started in about 30 years ago, maybe 35. And I met him, just one of those chance things, answering an ad. He was looking for a designer in BC, probably because of the exchange on the dollar, in large part, and partly because it would be Canadian, and he was still coming back and forth to Canada at the time, and ended up starting work with him about 25 years ago. And since then, this is a fairly new project, and I haven't actually, this is the first one we've done in about 8 years. We did quite a few, I think about 8 or 9 in a 10, 15 year period years ago. So it's about 25 years I've been working with him. And most of them were on Grand Cayman, and with one in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And so this one came up because there's very little land that is not developed in the Cayman Islands on what's called 7 Mile Beach, which is the nicest piece of beach there. And it faces west, and it has sunsets every night, and it's a beautiful, beautiful area there if you've not been. And this was a piece of property, fairly narrow, which is why the development is like it is. And it was a piece of property that was owned by a doctor. So it had a house on it and a clinic, which was run for years and years. And those people passed away, and the son inherited it. And he thought he could make some money and develop it. So he asked my friend, the developer, to go in with him to develop it. So he's supplying the property. So it's a very tight piece of property to develop. It's basically 100 feet wide. And one of the requirements is that you have to have 20-foot side yards for fire access. So that leaves you roughly 60 feet of building width, and which is what it is. So we have two villas, 2 apartments per floor, and they're both outside units, which is nice because you can have glass on 2 sides, actually 3, because we have some on the walkway side.
And what is this back building here?
The back building is an ancillary building that we had to put in. We needed 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and so that means 30. And just to get them in, this is a 2-level parking structure and then we put another little piece on top that's going to be a fitness area, gym, kind of a gym.
And so this little screen we had talked about, So you modeled this on the plan, turned it into Morph and flipped it up?
Yeah, and the screens with the idea we had, because there's two developments, one on each side of this, and this ancillary building is kind of in the same location as the clinic was, and it was just a single-story building with a hip roof on it. So we're trying to keep the look of it and the profile down as much as we could, and we thought we could disguise it a little bit with these palm frond kind of screens that we put in and still keep the parkade open to the air, so we can avoid having to put mechanical ventilation in that part of the parkade.
Okay, so one of the things that you pointed out in terms of interesting design is that the outside cladding here is actually just what it says insulation foam board. What is the technical term?
Well, it's rigid insulation, and then it'll have a drive-it finish on top of that. So I could have done it with just one composite, but then it got problematic because we had a different kind of finish on the stair towers, elevator and stair towers, which had a kind of a grooved, a defining grooved kind of pattern in it to give it some interest. And so all of that exterior cladding is actually just put on with another layer. And then, of course, I had to cut holes in it for the windows and doors and stuff. So it was a bit of work, but it's a little bit easier to detail the walls as they intersect different kinds of walls and things, because there was another requirement there. So
this is the wall here, and this is the cladding as put on as a separate wall with just holes cut out to
that's correct.
For the openings.
Yeah.
And you were saying that this could not connect structurally to the back concrete here, and that's why you had to separate it out with as well.
Yeah, so this is basically a column and slab structure, with the exception of the stair towers, which are your main. Most of the loading comes back to the back end of the building because there's mostly windows at the front and the sides. We have one shear wall right behind the kitchen that gives us a little bit of stability there, but the rest of all the loading is carried back to the stair and elevator towers. So those walls, some of them are fairly thick and concrete. So the walls that are in between the columns along the side are actually not structural. They're infill walls. They do have to handle some wind loading, of course, because you can get hurricanes there, but they couldn't be connected like with a solid structural connection to the slabs above. So basically the structure itself can stand and would stand without those sidewalls. So just on the columns and the slabs. And so they couldn't be hard connected. So we had to actually provide a disconnect there. And even the rebar is in sleeves that can actually move if the building starts to, with an earthquake or wind loading, starts to move a bit.
Now, obviously, with a multi-story building like this, you've taken advantage of modules because many of the stories are essentially the same footprint for the interior fit out. And so you've got some modules here that are for each of these middle stories. And I believe you said down at the, if we look at the facade here, down a little lower, like the third floor.
Well, all the floors from 1 to 9 are identical on the interior. The only difference on the first 3 floors is the terrace out the front is a bit longer or deeper. But the inside is the same module for the first 9 floors. So all the interiors are the module, with the exception of the structural component. So all the interior walls, steel stud walls and cabinets and furniture and all that kind of stuff is in the module. And then the 10th floor was different because I couldn't figure out, I played with it and I couldn't figure out because the 10th floor has a different story height. It's a taller story. So it didn't seem to work well because the walls are actually connected or related to the story above it, a certain set down, and the floor slabs are a different thickness than the roof slab above the 10th story.
Right.
So I have two modules basically.
We're almost at the top of the hour, so we will need to finish up.
Okay.
So I know we didn't look at sections and some of those things. I'm sure you modeled this in, fairly good detail.
Well,
here.
it's not finished yet. We're still working on it. So we have applied for a foundation permit, and so I am working through it. I've been doing the mechanical off of the mechanical consultant's drawings just to make sure. I don't think they're modeling everything in 3D. They work in Revit, but mostly AutoCAD, I think. And they're doing the MEP and F in this project, but I want to make sure that we have enough room in our drop ceilings to carry all that without problem. So I'm going to model it out myself, and then we'll have meetings with them.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. Chris John says, how are you doing your section keynotes?
Well, I actually haven't really started them on here because we've only applied for.
Maybe he was referring to the earlier model.
Oh, the earlier one. That was just text that I copy and paste from other projects and things, and this one is more schematic almost. But we will get into that. This one is pretty simple in lots of ways. There's very few. Other than the roof has to be obviously detailed, and some of the overhang and things like that will have some details, but a lot of the building is pretty straightforward, so it won't take that much. I just, oh, that shouldn't be there because I designed this progress payment. Anyway, if you turn off the, yeah, that's okay. So we were getting this was just produced to get some prices on the railings. And so I did a few 3D views and details of the corners and stuff, so the railing guy could do a takeoff.
Right, okay. Let's see if there's any other questions here. So David Proctor says, can you quickly zoom into the notes band at the right-hand side so we can see what kind of notes you put on? So maybe
where would that be?
I don't know, maybe you would be on the other project. That was a 240.
Oh, yeah, the other project, yeah.
All right, well, let's just switch over to that. I have that still open here. And okay, so this is, I think, maybe what he's talking about here.
Oh, okay.
So you've got notes that you are just putting in there manually, copied and pasted in, and just adjusting numbers as you need to for consistency with this project?
Yeah.
Yeah, so not doing anything automated, but...
No, I haven't. I am toying with that now well, I don't know if I would ever do it. Sometimes it's a matter of presentation too, and I do like clean drawings, and one thing that I've drives me crazy sometimes is I've seen people that do residential drawings and they have so much information on the plans that it's very likely that you will miss things because there's just so much stuff. And I've always kind of thought that wasn't too clear, and so tried to do it in different ways. I mean, there's many different ways to do it, and now we can attach all kinds of the criteria to the element themselves and pull that off, and I have done a little bit of that.
So I think we're about running out of time. I'm just going to finish up with a comment again. This particular project, which is in development, obviously not completed with all of the final drawings and schedules and things like that, but Gerald has been generous to share it with me and with John Hallgarth for use in the upcoming estimating training course, and actually we'll be able to share a version of it with people who join up for that course. So we'll be sharing a lot more information about that over the next month. And so if you want to see how all of this stuff is put together, as well as get the quantity, sort of methodology and framework, then please check that out. And remember, I'll just bring up that website here. So this is the ArchiCAD user website, the one to get more information, as well as the free download of a conceptual estimating worksheet is archicadestimating.com, which is a brand new site. So all it has right now is this opt-in form and a little bit of information about John and myself. So I want to thank Gerald for sharing that project, because it's one thing to learn in theory, and it's another thing to see it applied to a project of significant size. Yeah, so it's exciting. Today's session, and there's been so much that we've seen. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Let's see if there's any final comments or questions here. Always a juggling act, talking and then looking at these things. So Jeff Robinson asked about, does Canada have requirements about energy efficiency on residential buildings like yours? Does anyone use the ArchiCAD tool for this, like Eco-Design or STAR?
We do have energy requirements in our latest version of the building code, which just came out a year ago, December. What I've done, I just did a net zero house. Not this was a fairly old project, the one I sent. The reason I sent that one really was more to show the modeling and the template, which was what I thought Eric was asking for. So I've done a net zero house up in a place called Parksville, Qualicum Beach, Parksville area on northern Vancouver Island. And we just sent our model to an energy consultant and had them do it, because I'm not sure. There's a lot of extra work, just like estimating out of a project. I think that the amount of attention that you have to pay when you're modeling and know what you're doing as far as to get accurate estimating for energy would be another thing that Eric could do at some point, which I think, add that to the template somehow. Because we do have common wall structures and things in US, Canada. I mean, they're quite typical and quite similar. Is that might be another place to go. But they usually want it in a certain format if they're asking for it now with building departments. And so I didn't have the time to do it, and it was just a lot easier to hire somebody for, I think they charged $800 or something to do the whole project.
So the energy analysis, from what I've gathered, I was talking to some of the people who do this stuff routinely at the BIM conference that Graphisoft provided a year and a half ago. And found that while they will use the ArchiCAD model as part of it, that they're not using Eco-Design or STAR. Apparently, there are too many compromises in terms of what you have to do to make it work inside ArchiCAD. That being said, there probably are some people who are using it for at least some feedback, but I think it's probably not a really widely used solution at this point. So final question, Gary Quigley says, what sort of fire codes do you have to use? Do you simply apply Canadian codes to ensure compliance? So
now, was he referring to the job in the Caymans or in?
I imagine so, because the other one is in Canada, so you're applying Canadian codes.
The Caymans has adopted for the most part, they have a couple of different sections. For the most part, it's the 2009 version of the International Building Code. And then they have they break out certain areas. So we actually have the MEPF consultant down there applies the fire code. So we've just got our fire drawings updated and back a couple days ago. So I'm going over those. But they're basically US 2009 version, I think, is the fire one as well.
Right, okay.
And I found out the hard way, I hadn't done a tall building before, that everything changes after you get past 6 stories or something, 5 or 6 stories. So the requirements are a lot more numerous and strict when you get into tall buildings.
Yeah, which makes sense.
I'm learning on the fly, but we have help.
Yeah. So Lou Bishops is our previous presenters. It's Gerald, great work. Steve says, really enjoyed seeing others work, valuable session, excellent. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I see other thank yous like John Ryder, great presentation, enjoyed it very much. Gary Quigley says, fire risers, the fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thank you all. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Caitlin and John. Be back next month with another ArchiCAD user session. If you want more assistance with ArchiCAD in general, feel free to reach out to me, and I do have training courses and coaching to help you be more successful with ArchiCAD. And check out archicadestimating.com if you'd like to get in a little bit deeper on going beyond just schedules to get real quantity takeoffs and cost estimation. This is going to be a great solution for you. So thank you all. We'll finish up.
Goodbye.
All right, take care.